Hello, I'm Esther Gitu-Ewart. It's Thursday, September 1st, and this is Africa 54.
Ethiopian and Eritrean forces have launched a massive joint offensive against the Tigray People's Liberation Front in the northern region of Tigray. We'll have details. How cash transfer plans are helping families cope as Somalia's drought worsens. And in Prague, a South Sudanese model is crowned the winner of the world's most prestigious modeling competition.
We begin our broadcast in the Horn of Africa, where Ethiopian and Eritrean government forces launched a massive joint offensive on Thursday against the Tigray People's Liberation Front in the northern region of Tigray, according to a Twitter statement by the rebels' military command and the Tigray External Affairs Office. Paul Ndiho has more on the conflict.
Full-scale fighting has resumed in Ethiopia's northern Tigray region, dealing a blow to peace efforts. Ethiopian and Eritrean forces launched a heavy joint offensive against the Tigray People's Liberation Front. The rebels are claimed in a statement released on Twitter. The statement says, quote, "The enemy, having already relocated a massive military force to Eritrea, has now begun a joint campaign with the foreign invading force of Eritrea to brutalize and exterminate the people of Tigray." VOA so far has not independently verified the claims. Access to northern Ethiopia is severely restricted, and Tigray has been under a communications blackout for over a year. The Ethiopian government on Wednesday accused the TPLF of launching a more comprehensive invasion into parts of western Tigray and other areas west of the initial clashes.
What we're saying that the people of the Tigray region, the people of the Amhara and Afar region that are also neighboring this region cannot afford another altercation like this, so it is immediate that this commitment for a ceasefire needs to happen.
Fighting between government forces and the rebels resumed last week after a 5-month pause. However, clashes on the ground and air raids over Tigray have dashed hopes for peacefully resolving the nearly 2-year war, with the rebels pushing into the neighboring Amhara and Afar regions, sending residents fleeing. Both sides accuse each other of firing fast and shattering a March ceasefire. The renewed fighting has alarmed the international community, with senior diplomats from the European Union, Britain, the United States, the African Union, and the United Nations Chief Antonio Guterres appealing for restraint.
It is time for all parties to recognize that there is no military solution, and it's vital to preserve the unity and stability of Ethiopia, which is critical to the region and beyond.
Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed sent troops into Tigray to topple the TPLF in November 2020 in a response to what he says were rebel attacks on federal army camps. For months, Abiy's government denied the involvement of Eritrean forces in the conflict, though he later admitted their presence in Ethiopia. The TPLF captured most of Tigray in a surprise comeback in June 2021 and expanded into Afar and Amhara before fighting reached a stalemate. According to media reports, tens of thousands, including civilians, have died in Tigray fighting, and millions are suffering from a humanitarian crisis as a result of the conflict. Paul Ndiho, VOA News, Washington.
A devastating drought is reaching unprecedented levels in Somalia. The United Nations Refugee Agency says 1 million people within the country are currently registered as displaced. Some families in the affected parts of Somalia are receiving cash donations to help them cope as the country battles drought and rising inflation. Clara Frank has more.
About 150,000 families are already benefiting from the mobile phone-based cash assistance plan. Each family was given $90 to cover the cost of food or other basic items through the program run by the International Committee of the Red Cross. This emergency relief is the first in a series of monthly payments to support people pushed out of their homes by the severe drought. When Dadir Ahmed Adan received the grant, he says he used $50 to open a small shop and the rest to buy food for his family. Adan has been living at the camp since June. The drought has lasted 4 consecutive rainy seasons, and its economic impact on vulnerable communities is aggravated by the protracted armed conflict and rising food and fuel prices. Cash assistance aims to help the most vulnerable survive and to minimize their debt.
Our transport from Bakol to Beledweyne was on credit. I paid back my debt to the driver after receiving money from ICRC.
With the next rains due in October, many rural families stripped of their livelihoods may continue to flee to towns, hoping to receive help from relatives and aid groups. The UN says more than 30,000 people were displaced in May, 100,000 in June, while July recorded 83,000. Since January 2021, more than 1 million people are believed to have been displaced because of the drought. To help people build resilience in the face of the worsening impact of climate shocks, agricultural cooperatives are being supported with drought-resistant seeds, farming tools, training, and cash for fuel needed to irrigate.
We do this to keep their farming business going, despite the droughts that occur.
For pastoralists, dwindling herds are becoming commonplace. The International Red Cross is distributing cash assistance to people in conflict-affected parts of Somalia, as well as rehabilitating boreholes and wells. The Red Cross also supports primary health care. The Red Cross also supports primary health care services. Clara Frank, VOA News, Washington.
Zambia's economy, which has suffered at the hands of mismanagement and the COVID-19 pandemic, is about to receive a major boost thanks to the International Monetary Fund, which has agreed to rescue the Southern African country through a 38-month aid program. David Doyle explains.
Zambia took a crucial step closer on Wednesday to restructuring its debts and rebuilding its ravaged economy. The International Monetary Fund said in a statement that it had approved a $1.3 billion 38-month loan program with the Southern African country. Zambia has suffered at the hands of economic mismanagement and COVID-19. In 2020, it became the first pandemic-era sovereign default, buckling under a debt burden of more than 120% of GDP. In late July, creditors, led by France and China, pledged to renegotiate Zambia's debts. That was welcomed by IMF Managing Director Kristalina Georgieva as clearing the way for the new IMF program. On Wednesday, Georgieva said Zambia continues to face profound challenges reflected in high poverty levels and low growth. The extended credit facility program, she added, would aim to restore macroeconomic stability and foster higher, resilient and more inclusive growth. The IMF said the funding arrangement is equivalent to 100% of Zambia's quota or shareholding in the fund. Wednesday's approval, the IMF said, will also unlock an immediate disbursement of about $185 million.
David Doyle of Reuters filed that report. The World Health Organization Director General Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus says the monkeypox virus can be eliminated in countries where there is no animal-to-human transmission. The WHO declared the monkeypox outbreak a global health emergency in July. So far, more than 50,000 cases of the virus and 16 deaths have been reported in 96 countries, with more than half of the cases reported in the Americas. Meanwhile, cases in Europe are declining after a month-long trend of rising infections. However, Tedros says we might be living with COVID-19 for the foreseeable future, but we don't have to live with monkeypox.
These signs confirm what we have said consistently since the beginning, that with the right measures, this is an outbreak that can be stopped. And in regions that do not have animal to human transmission, this is a virus that can be eliminated. In the Americas, which accounts for more than half of reported cases, several countries continue to see increasing numbers of infections, although it's encouraging to see a sustained downward trend in Canada. Some European countries, including Germany and the Netherlands, are also seeing a clear slowing of the outbreak, demonstrating the effectiveness of public health interventions and community engagement to track infections and prevent transmission.
Rosamond Lewis, the WHO technical lead, says cases of people who have been infected through different routes have been reported, and he recommends the use of condoms to reduce skin-to-skin contact. But he says they don't know how much of the infection is transmitted through semen.
We are seeing a few cases of women and others who may have acquired monkeypox through a different route of infection, different mode of transmission. But the vast majority today are still among men who have sex with men, whether they be gay, bisexual, or otherwise have contact with other men who have monkeypox. Some agencies, including WHO, are recommending the use of condoms. That is in part as a precautionary measure because we don't know how much of the infection is transmitted through semen, but it is also because it does reduce skin-to-skin contact. So it's preferable to avoid skin-to-skin contact altogether if someone has monkeypox, but at the very least, using a condom may reduce that risk while we do more studies to learn more information.
Monkeypox is a viral disease which spreads via close contact and tends to cause flu-like symptoms and skin lesions, and has been spreading chiefly in men who have sex with men in the recent outbreak outside Africa, where it is endemic. An oil tanker was briefly stuck in Egypt's Suez Canal Wednesday night, raising fears that last year's major blockage of the global maritime route could be repeated. The Affinity V ran aground in the canal at 17:15 GMT, according to a security source who says the incident was caused by technical damage to the rudder, resulting in a loss of control of that ship. However, the 64,000-ton tanker was successfully refloated. The Suez Canal, a vital portal between Asia and Europe, sees about 10% of the world's maritime trade. Still to come, a South Sudanese model is crowned winner of the world's most prestigious modeling competition. Stay with us.
From around the world, let's go.
In other African news, Emirates Airlines will resume some flights to Nigeria this month after the Central Bank of Nigeria released a portion of funds the Dubai airline had earned in the country but had not been able to repatriate. The state-owned Botswana Power Corporation has awarded Norwegian company Scatec ASAA contract to build a 50-megawatt solar plant. In Southern Africa, petrochemical firm Sasol is paying $24 million to settle a class action lawsuit brought by U.S. investors claiming it deliberately understated the cost of its Louisiana chemical plant project. South Sudanese model Majda John Peter is crowned the winner of the world's most prestigious modeling competition. Christy Kilburn has the details.
Majda John Peter says winning the world's most prestigious modeling competition was a shock.
My dream is to promote young models in South Sudan, to teach them how to model, like to open a big agency for them.
The South Sudanese model was crowned the female winner of the 39th Elite Model Look event in Prague on Tuesday. The event, hosted by global modeling agency Elite, took place on Tuesday for the first time since 2019. The male winner was Sergi Sean, who was half Chinese from Spain.
Majda, everyone, all the contestants really put something very special, and I mean, it could have been anyone. I really was sure that it was someone else that would win. But so it was really surreal, this feeling.
The winners at the Prague Castle event were picked from 30 finalists who were selected out of thousands from more than 100 different nationalities. Judge and top Czech model Teresa Mexova said the world of fashion has become more diverse.
The borders to Asia or Africa are open and the variety is a big plus, but it is much more complicated. Careers are shorter. The competition is huge.
That was Christy Kilburn of Reuters reporting. Legal experts see a bombshell in the U.S. Justice Department's Tuesday night filing saying it had to approve the FBI search of former President Donald Trump's Florida residence and club because sensitive U.S. government documents had been likely concealed and removed to obstruct the investigation. Here's VOA's senior diplomatic correspondent, Cindy Sen.
A photograph released as an attachment to a late-night Justice Department filing shows classified documents spread out on the floor of former President Donald Trump's home office at his Mar-a-Lago residence, making clear the extreme sensitivity of the documents, as one expert told VOA.
These are documents from the photo that it's clear as crystal based on the markings on the outside of these documents, sort of bright orange lettering, that this is classified information. So there's no ambiguity there. He has argued or suggested that he declassified things. These are not marked declassified, and of course, without that kind of distinction, without that shift, the whole classification situation wouldn't work because people need to know if something is classified or unclassified.
The unannounced August 8th FBI search of Mar-a-Lago came after one of Trump's lawyers avowed in June that all classified documents had been returned. The Justice Department said the Trump lawyer who made that assertion explicitly prohibited government personnel from opening or looking inside any of the boxes that remained in the storage room, giving no opportunity for the government to confirm that no documents with classification markings remained. Another expert explained why this could be a big problem for Trump and his attorneys.
What made this worse, the reason that I think this will result in an indictment, was the resistance, was the concealment, was the obstruction, relocating records throughout Mar-a-Lago, swearing to the FBI in June there are no more records, and yet the FBI is able to identify evidence that there is more information, there are more records, and that the Trump team was concealing it.
Moss told VOA he believes Trump may face criminal charges over the documents, but he does not think an indictment is imminent.
You don't bring this kind of indictment unless you have a rock-solid case and you have got every I dotted and every T crossed. I don't think they're there yet, but I believe they will be within a few months.
The Justice Department will likely consider the political implications of indicting a former president, but there are also national security concerns, Wayla said.
But in my mind, the much bigger thing that's on the FBI's plate right now, and presumably the CIA and other parts of the national security apparatus in the United States, is holy cow, how compromised are we? How serious is this breach? Did Donald Trump move documents out of Mar-a-Lago? Are there additional documents we don't know about that he still has? And the big question, did he enable access to our foreign adversaries?
Trump has denied any wrongdoing, but has not explained why he removed so many classified documents from the White House. In posts on social media, he has attacked the Justice Department and the FBI, saying without any evidence that the search of his home was politically motivated.
Now it's sickening to see the new attacks on the FBI.
President Joe Biden has condemned attacks by some Republicans on the FBI, saying they are law enforcement agents whose lives are being threatened for simply doing their jobs. Biden has also said he will leave the Trump document investigation completely up to the Justice Department. Cindy Sain, VOA News.
Britain is set to have a new Prime Minister next week, nearly 2 months after the resignation of Boris Johnson in July. As Henry Ridgwell reports, Johnson's successor faces a series of daunting challenges.
At 10 Downing Street, the moving vans have come and gone. Prime Minister Boris Johnson is on his way out. Conservative Party members will choose his successor, former Chancellor Rishi Sunak, or current Foreign Secretary Liz Truss, who polls suggest is the overwhelming favourite. Their first challenge, the war in Ukraine. Britain has provided around $2.7 billion worth of military aid to Kiev since Russia's invasion in February, second only to the United States. Johnson is hugely popular in Kiev. So will his departure spell a changing relationship? That's highly unlikely under Truss, says Alan Wager, a political analyst at King's College London.
She's also committed to increasing UK defence spending to 3% of gross domestic product and continuing the supply of arms to Ukraine.
Ukraine may be the least complicated of the challenges facing Britain's next Prime Minister. Domestic gas and electricity prices are set to soar by 80% in October, compounding the post-COVID economic crisis and raising the prospect of an imminent recession.
Families just cannot afford anything close to this. It's a disaster. 10,000 people die every year in the UK directly because of a cold home. That number is going to skyrocket.
Truss has ruled out helping people pay their bills and says tax cuts are the answer.
What's important is that we get the economy growing.
Relations with European neighbours are strained. Asked on the campaign trail if the president of France, a NATO ally, was a friend or foe, Truss gave this answer.
The jury's out, but if I become Prime Minister, I'll judge him on deeds, not words.
Truss has pledged to rip up the Northern Ireland Protocol, a key Brexit customs agreement that Boris Johnson signed with the European Union to avoid a hard border between the Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland.
That could lead in time to a trade war between the UK and the EU.
The two candidates are appealing to a relatively tiny electorate, fewer than 200,000 Conservative Party members. They have rarely been tested on the campaign trail, says Wager.
So the UK is entering into this new crisis, if you like, this new economic crisis coupled with this international crisis in the Ukraine without its political leaders having confronted the key challenges that the UK faces.
Truss or Sunak will move into 10 Downing Street next Monday, but it may not be all over for Johnson. British media report he is eyeing a comeback and expects a bumpy ride for his successor. Henry Ridgwell for VOA News, London.
Persuasion, a new film based on Jane Austen's early 19th century novel, has ranked among the top 10 on the Netflix streaming platform. While Austen's diehards and many critics have slammed it as inauthentic, others say such modernized versions could attract new audiences to the books of the celebrated English author. VOA's Penelope Pulu has more.
I almost got married once. There were no two souls more in rhythm than Wentworth and I.
In Carrie Cracknell's film Persuasion, based on the early 19th century novel by Jane Austen, Dakota Johnson plays Anne Elliot, a young woman from an aristocratic family who was once persuaded to break off her engagement to a young naval officer due to his lack of status and money. 8 years later, she's still pining for him.
It's been 7 years.
8.
Darling, at some point, you have to move on.
Many traditionalist Austen fans describe the latest flick as a parody, appealing to millennials who, they argue, have never read her classics. Others, such as Timothy Irwin, an Austen expert at University of Nevada, Las Vegas, say modern adaptations such as the latest Persuasion have merit, incorporating contemporary language and modern sensibilities into Austen's timeless classics. He points to the film's multiracial cast depicting 18th century English aristocracy.
I appreciate the fact that a more diverse audience, through a greater variety of formats, is being given access to some of the most wonderful, creative, vivid literature available in English. That's got to be a good thing.
Perfect. Gillian Davis of the Pemberley podcast thinks Austen would appreciate the different renditions of her works.
In many ways, Jane Austen was the first modern romance novelist because, the book and sort of fiction landscape when she was alive at the time was really mostly skewed towards men, and there weren't a ton of books written from a female point of view. It was really radical to just show women pursuing a happily ever after and getting it. That just didn't exist back then.
Podcaster Molly Burdick and producer Graham Cook of Pod and Prejudice say during the pandemic, Austen has been more relatable than ever.
You had to first start out messaging, then FaceTime dates, which would be the equivalent of
writing a letter to them.
You literally were writing letters.
Going for walks in public parks.
So
not
many walks.
Touching.
You're 6 feet apart at all times. You can't touch until marriage. So it really became, I feel a lot more relevant.
Irwin says film has always served Austen's legacy. Acclaimed Austen adaptations, such as the 1995 BBC production of Persuasion and 2005 Pride and Prejudice by filmmaker Joe Wright, helped catapult her fame to new heights, despite their condensed format, while 21st century film renditions of her stories, he says, may bring millennials to the Austen books. Or maybe not.
Maybe they don't go to the books and maybe they just explore other film adaptations or other TV shows. If anything, it opens it up to female writers, and Persuasion was directed by a woman too.
It all speaks to Jane Austen's timelessness. Penelope Pulu, VOA News, Washington.
And thank you for watching Africa 54. Good night.